I don't know.
DeBrickashaw was great once upon a time. Okay, couple things. BetUS had a graphic up. What kind of grade would you give Kyle Shanahan for the year? And eighth season, 4 NFC Championship games, 2 Super Bowl appearances. This year, they were Super Bowl favorites in the preseason. They went 6-11. We all saw it. It was ugly. Bunch of injuries. CMC played 4 games. Ayuk played 7. Dre Greenlaw played 2. Hargrave only played 3. So there were some challenges for sure. But it was Shanahan himself that chose Nick Sorensen as his defensive coordinator, Brian Schneider as his special teams coordinator. So I don't know what you would point to, but Shanahan wasn't sharp, but they had injuries. But Purdy had second half of the season turnovers, uncharacteristic. They were defensive breakdowns, special team screw-ups. And to me, it was defined by they were awful in the red zone on both sides of the ball, so they literally looked good as far as yards and rankings, but they really were more defined by points. Yeah, I mean, that's why I never look at yards. Always look at points, because points win games. Points get you hired and fired. So they were not good in points. And
situational football matters, Lair.
What grade would you give Shanahan for the year?
D. It was terribly unpragmatic. A couple things stand out to me. One, the force feeding of Deebo Samuel against the Rams. It's like you just figured out the guy can't do it. You're going to have to force feed him because he, went on some Twitter rampage. Like this is lame ass coaching, and it shows that you're cracking under some pressure here. Brock didn't get better. Right? I know that Brock didn't have a great situation around him, but he didn't get better. They made something out of Jordan Mason, but the offense took 14, 15 weeks to figure out that everyone was just going to copy the Kansas City Chiefs game plan from the Super Bowl against them. And Kyle's like, no, we'll just keep doing what we keep doing. And it was poorly offensively coordinated. And then as a head coach, the defense was, well, there was a lot of communication breakdowns, Larry. Let's leave it at that. And the special teams was awful. So, other than that, I felt like it went pretty well. You can't give him a C.
It was a good year.
Yeah, you can't say like, oh, well, it's a C, because a C implies that there's some level of quality to be struck. And you can't give it an F, because if you got an F as a head coach, that means you should get fired. F is for fired. You shouldn't have fired him, but that's about as bad as you can be without making us say we should fire you. So that's how it went.
I guess, Shanahan was hired first. So Lynch is his hand-picked general manager. So everybody just holds Kyle's feet to the fire for all of it. I don't know how much hand Kyle has in picking players or not, but that's really it. I mean, it's
less than he used to, but still.
Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, it's all his responsibility.
Word. Yeah.
I mean, it's his responsibility. It's his show. He's the guy making all the money. He's the guy. He was the main guy, and he still is the main guy. So, So there you go. The number one reason the Niners are at where they're at is that they went, they missed on 10 picks in the first 3 rounds in 21, 22, and 23. That's it. Period. End of story. Mm-hmm. The rest of it is just like that. It's pro football. In pro football, you have to have players, and it's as simple as that. If they miss 5 times, think about that. They'd have 5 more. If the 49ers miss 5 times in the first 3 rounds in the previous 3 drafts, that would be bad. Okay, that would be bad. But think about it. In that scenario, the 49ers would have 5 more players on their team right now that are absolutely in the prime of their career, in their first, second, or third year, and they were drafted in the first 3 rounds of the draft. They'd have 5 more players like that on their team. Do you think they would be better?
Yeah, it's about the Joes before the X's and O's.
Yeah, it's about the players. It's about the players, and they missed on too many players.
I'm with you on that. But when we talk about the X's and O's, what did Kyle Shanahan do to First off, again, he has a lot of responsibility, but even exonerating him, right? If we're going to separate
I'm not
out
exonerating him. I'm just saying it's
no,
not all him. Probably it's also the failure of Lynch. If they had some awesome GM that like if they were Brad Holmes, Brad Holmes is kicking ass right now.
But the irony is that the 49ers actually had a pretty good season personnel-wise. They drafted fairly well
this year.
They had some hits and they had some misses in free agency. Maybe the misses loom larger, but that's free agency. Like free agency, I don't think you bat over 50% in free agency in general. There's a reason those guys are available. So you're just hoping for, 2 or 3 good ones out of the large bunch. But that was a good draft. John Lynch had, brought in a couple of, decent players in free agency. You could make the argument that they had a good year. And in fact, I would, except when you have 4 bad years before that, it doesn't matter because it is accumulation of all of these things. This is why I keep referring to NFL teams as programs. You can't just, it's ironic, in college football where you do have what we consider programs. In 1 year, you can Kurt Signetti this sumbitch and get an entirely new team in to the University of Indiana or wherever with the transfer portal. But in the NFL, you really have to have 2, 3, 4 years of sustained success in personnel in order to put together a championship caliber or a playoff caliber team. So those are, the NFL is more of a program these days than these college quote unquote programs ever or are at this juncture. It's recruiting classes, right? In order to be good at the college level, you have to put up recruiting class. At least that's how it used to be. The Niners had a good recruiting class this past year. They did well in their version of the transfer portal, all things considered. It didn't burn them more than, whatever. I would say that John, I'd give John a C because they didn't actually address. I don't think I'd been banging on the drum all preseason, all off that they had to get better at linebacker. They didn't do that effectively. They didn't get better on the defensive line, and they left some real issues on the offensive line. Those were not glaring going into free agency in the draft last year, but it was something I wanted addressed more, and they didn't do any of those 3. Sure enough, guess what? They have those 3 same issues again, and they're even more glaring now. So I can't give them a B or an A. But at the same time, he did draft well, and a Malik Collins is at least an NFL caliber player that they were able to bring in on a trade, and they were able to do a couple of things that were fairly effective. So a C for John, a D for Kyle. This is the first time that they've had bad marks on their report cards in quite a minute, so they get another shot at this thing, and I'm excited to see how it goes. They're not that far away.
I'm going to give them a C- because I think some of the things that went wrong this year, they had nothing to do with. They really did have nothing to do with. And when I
but they put themselves in a position to be susceptible to such things.
No, I'm not. I'm not apologizing for them. I'd give them bad grades. I would give them. Some people said D. I'm not going to give them a D. I'd probably give them a C- because I'd give Kyle a C-, but I would give John as well a really low grade because even though you had a good draft, you can't the teams that you see now are the products of what they did 3 years ago.
Right.
And so, if you look at the 85 Bears, it wasn't that they draft. Who did they draft in 1985? No. It was who they drafted in 79.
Well, don't ask me questions
80.
like that I want the answers to immediately.
It was the 83 draft. It was Jim Finks' amazing 83 draft, which is why the 85 Bears. The Niners' greatest 3-year run was
to be fair, they
88.
did draft William Perry in 1985.
Okay. But 88, 89,
and Kevin
90.
Butler, the kicker.
The Niners' greatest run ever was 88, 89, 90. And that was on the heels of Jerry Rice in 85 and the 86 draft netted them 8 starters.